Get ready for a fascinating mystery that has kept the world in suspense for almost a century. What really happened to the people who opened the tomb of King Tut? On November 4, 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter stumbled upon the tomb of the legendary Tutankhamun, a milestone in archaeology. But soon after, a dark mystery overshadowed this discovery. Mysterious deaths began to pile up, and it was rumored that a cruel curse had been unleashed. But what is really behind the legend of the Pharaoh's curse? The Child King. What officially goes by the simple name of KV-62 actually embodies one of the greatest mysteries of modern archaeology, the tomb of the ancient Egyptian king Tutankhamun. The death mask of Tutankhamun, which the researchers recovered at that time, has since been one of the most famous finds from ancient Egypt. About the historical person, we know that he was originally born as Tutankhamun, but he changed his name when he ascended the throne around 1332 BC. At that time, the very young ruler was only 9 years old, which is why historians suspect that the Child King was strongly influenced by the priests, high officials, and his later successor, Agi. A modern CT scan conducted in 2005 revealed that Tutankhamun was between 18 and 20 years old at the time of his death. However, scientific minds are still at odds over the exact cause of death. While for a long time there was suspicion of an insidious murder, the CT scan revealed that the ruler had not suffered a severe blow to the head, but instead had suffered a fracture to the left thigh, the right knee, and the right lower leg. Against this background, most experts believe that Tutankhamun succumbed to the consequences of a hunting accident. Subsequently, his body was to be transferred to the legendary Valley of the Kings and laid to rest in the tomb complex mentioned at the beginning of this article. The unleashing of the curse. When Howard Carter rediscovered the royal tomb on November 4, 1922, he and his men could not believe their eyes, since the site was bursting with precious artifacts and also still contained the pharaoh's mummy. The conclusion was initially that the tomb had remained untouched until then. However, we now know the site was entered twice in ancient times and then sealed again. Before the staircase buried under the rubble was uncovered and the tomb was entered, however, another 3 weeks were to pass. During this time, a certain Lord Carnarvon arrived in Luxor, a stone-rich aristocrat who financed the excavation. In the weeks and months that followed, the researchers finally penetrated deeper and deeper into the tomb. The huge media frenzy that accompanied the sensational discovery meant that many notable people also traveled to marvel at the site with their own eyes, including, for example, the Queen of Belgium. Finally, April 5, 1923 was the day when the legend of the Pharaoh's curse began. However, the unexpected death of Lord Carnarvon was merely the prelude to a series of strange incidents that to this day give rise to the wildest speculations. The Curse Tablet. But what had happened? Well, to understand the background of the alleged curse, we should first take a look at a disturbing discovery that Howard Carter allegedly recorded during the tomb opening. According to this, the researcher had come across an occult clay tablet at that time, which urgently warned everyone not to enter the king's tomb. On it was written, "Death will come on swift wings to the one who disturbs the peace of the pharaoh." Shortly after its discovery, however, the message is said to have mysteriously disappeared, which is why some experts suspect that such an artifact never existed in reality. Mysterious incidents. Strictly speaking, however, Lord Carnarvon was not at all the first victim of the alleged pharaoh's curse. Thus, his canary is said to have been killed by a cobra already on the day of the tomb opening, an incident which provided among the native ones for large uneasiness. After all, the poisonous snakes were considered in the old Egyptian mythology as the protectors of the pharaoh. What we know about Lord Carnarvon's demise is that he accidentally cut himself open while shaving in March 1923. Unfortunately, the cut became severely infected, so that the aristocrat subsequently developed blood poisoning and then pneumonia. When he fell victim to his illness on April 5th, rumor quickly spread that Tutankhamun's face had a scar on the very spot where Carnarvon had cut himself. But that wasn't all. At the moment the Briton drew his last breath, the power was said to have gone out all over Cairo. Rumor has it that this was also the moment when his favorite dog died at his home mansion, Highclere Castle. The curse takes hold. The idea that the ancient Egyptians placed death-dealing protective spells on the tombs of their kings was then picked up by the media and some celebrities who continued to play it up. For example, the Sherlock Holmes author, Arthur Conan Doyle, said about the death of Carnarvon, "Possibly something elementally evil is this cause. It is not known what spiritual beings existed at that time. The ancient Egyptians had much more knowledge about these things than we do." But no matter whether ancient Egyptian spirits were at work or not, it is certain that many people died under mysterious circumstances as a result of the tomb opening. For example, George J. Gould I, a good friend of Carnarvon, who had also visited the site, died of pneumonia on May 1923. Gardien Lafleur was also no longer alive 2 days after his visit to the tomb. A little later, his companion at the time committed suicide, referring to the pharaoh's curse in his suicide note. The scientist Archibald Reed collapsed while examining the pharaoh's mummy and died soon after of a sudden illness. Other people also committed suicide or suffered fatal accidents. In view of the countless victims who were associated with the opening of the king's tomb or who had visited it, a fundamental question arises: how can all these disturbing incidents be explained? As a reminder, we are talking about up to 20 deaths. As a result of the events, a real hysteria spread practically all over the world. Fearing that they too would be hit by a curse, many private owners sent their Egyptian artifacts to the British Museum in London. But anyone who now believes that the pharaoh's curse gradually subsided in the years following the tomb's discovery was mistaken. While a number of incidents linked to the deadly spell occurred in the 1960s, including the death of the head of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, the CT scan of the mummy was also accompanied by some strange events. For example, a heavy sandstorm broke out during the examination, and in addition, it also began to rain, which is extremely rare in the area in question. The car that brought the CT scanner narrowly escaped an accident, and later the CT scanner failed for 2 hours. Alternative explanations. But how is all this possible? Are there any explanations that do not come from the world of the mystical or the occult? Yes, there are. Because although the curse of the pharaohs was taken extremely seriously at that time and felt as frighteningly real, we should not forget that already in the 20s many counter voices arose, which pursued a scientific beginning. For example, a certain Ralph Shirley put forward the theory that the supposed curse was actually due to the effect of the poison that the ancient Egyptians had applied to the grave goods for protection. Basically, the Pharaoh Rickenbauer would have created a special safety system of vegetable poisons and bacteria, which punish the looting of a grave indirectly with the death. Somewhat more foolhardy, on the other hand, is the claim laid by Louis Bulgarini in the late 1940s. The nuclear physicist was convinced that the ancient Egyptians had a profound knowledge of radioactivity and deliberately irradiated their tombs. At the beginning of the 1960s, Ezzedine Taha then put forward the theory that black mold had spread into the royal tomb over the centuries. Consequently, visitors would have inhaled the dangerous spores unfiltered and developed serious diseases. One of the best-known theories in a similar vein is that of the so-called Aspergillus flavus. This assumption, which became known as part of the documentary series Terra X, is based on the assumption that the Egyptians deliberately brought the life-threatening fungus into the tomb of the pharaoh. In fact, the fungi could be detected in Tutankhamun's tomb, and if one follows the theory, they are even said to be responsible for all deaths that occurred in connection with tomb openings over the centuries. Theories put to the test. At this point, however, it should not go unmentioned that even these plausible explanations are not free of criticism. Apart from the fact that no radioactivity was detected at Tutankhamun's tomb, the Australian expert stated with regard to the Aspergillus flavus theory that it was impossible that the spores could survive for such a long period of time in a dry tomb. The toxin thesis was also not only met with approval, wouldn't many more people have died from the effect of the toxin? Because in view of all the fatalities, we quickly ignore one circumstance. Countless grave visitors were supposed to survive their trip unharmed and lived a long life. First and foremost, Howard Carter. He died only in 1939 at the age of 64. Lord Carnarvon's daughter, Evelyn, who was among the first to enter the tomb, lived until the 1980s. Sir Alan Gardner's year of death was 1963. He had examined the grave inscriptions. Also, the fact that almost all of the supposed curse victims were either elderly or in failing health is often swept under the rug of the subject. Lord Carnarvon, for example, had already been complaining of numerous physical ailments since a car accident in 1901, and his friend George Gould had been ill for a long time. In conclusion, we would like to once again give voice to Howard Carter, who had this to say about the Pharaoh's curse. All men of sound mind should dismiss such fabrications with contempt. So folks, and now it's your turn. What do you think about the alleged tomb curse? How do you think the incidents can be explained? Feel free to hit the like and subscribe buttons and write us your thoughts below in the comments. And with that, thanks for watching, take care, and see you next time.